So every now and then you get a chance to chop it up with Paul. Paul Sippil.
What's going on?
You tell me, buddy. How you doing? Took us a
Doing
little
pretty
while to get
good.
here today.
Yeah, a little bit, but
Yeah.
hey, we're here. That's what matters.
Exactly. All else fails, unplug everything and plug it back in. See what happens.
Yep, that's usually what works the best.
We've pretty much figured out Paul will not be on the first mission to Mars. Probably probably better off sending some of those Elon Musk robots that they're going to send.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we all have to be humble. Some of us could use a little help, a little more help in some areas than others.
That is true. That is true. So, talk a little bit about your journey to where you got here today. Talk a little bit about what you've done with your life and talk a little bit about overcoming some challenges.
Yeah. Well, I've always had an investigative mind. I guess since I was a little kid,
Now, you should
uh,
probably tell people what you do for a living because I
yes,
don't think anybody's going to know that right off the get-go.
no, and a lot of people haven't heard the term forensic 401k consultant. And I use the term forensic. It's just really due to a lot of curiosity that I had about the retirement industry. And it came about, I still remember this conversation I had, it was 20 years ago. I don't remember the exact day, but I know about the right time. Then a colleague of mine told me how you could actually look up these companies' 401k plan tax forms, and it was all public. And I just could not believe that information was a matter of public record. I was doing some different things. I wasn't really focused on that area, and I didn't know what to do with it. But I had to just make a few phone calls to some businesses I looked up when I looked up their tax forms. And I would think when I saw these just crazy amounts of money coming out of people's accounts, these eye-popping service charges, and I thought I'd be a hero, and they would thank me profusely for telling them about all this money that was coming out of their accounts. But instead, what they told me is, oh, no, I'm not paying anything. And oh, no, my friend handles that all for me. So I think everything's fine. And I kept getting these responses. And basically, that was what led me to believe that the industry was so lacking in transparency and there were such significant conflicts of interest. And it was so confusing that even these really successful multimillionaire business owners had no idea that they were essentially being taken advantage of and really taken advantage of for a long time. And even giving them evidence of what was happening was not enough to convince them that anything was wrong. It
That's
was,
awesome.
yeah.
And have you done a forensic analysis of Nancy Pelosi's 401k yet? She seems to be pretty good
Oh,
at 401k trading stocks things.
that's actually a really good question because it's not Nancy Pelosi, but I've looked up like the Obama Foundation's tax form.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I found Chelsea Handler's tax form. It was kind of by accident because I was searching for another plan with the name Handler in it. I could find information on Donald Trump's companies, and it's
Trumpy.
amazing.
How's Trumpy doing these days? He's doing pretty good.
I think the
I mean,
plan
we got world peace, right?
that's right. Trump is. Well, I don't know if I want to comment on that, but I hope we have world peace one day. I'll say, but more transparency, I think, will ultimately be good in the long run. Although it could cause some short-term pain. I'll say that.
That is true. That is true. So, t talk about your average client. Who are some of your clients that you work with?
It's mostly small and mid-sized business owners, really any industry. And the reason it's not really large companies is those companies are not the ones getting taken advantage of. The reason is that they have economies of scale. So the cost per person with regard to what's called record keeping and administration services and sometimes financial advisory services is minuscule if there's tens of thousands of employees. But plans really with under 200 and especially under 100 employees are getting especially taken advantage of. And those are the ones that are being most effective. Now, what's ironic, and I want to add something, is there have been a lot of 401k plan lawsuits regarding excessive fees. And I want to backtrack just a bit because part of the reason I left my company and start off on my own is because I was actually criticizing a large financial services provider by the name of John Hancock for being involved in excessive fee lawsuits. And these lawsuits were really regarding bigger plans. And my old company had a relationship with them because that was one of the approved vendors that we could recommend. And I got in trouble for putting out information that was true, but was critical of someone they worked with. And that's what actually led me to go off on my own independently, so I wouldn't have a muzzle put on me and I could essentially say what I want and charge how I want and not actually have somebody pulling my strings. But the point I'm making about these lawsuits is that the lawsuits are with the bigger companies, but they're not the ones getting taken advantage of. It might be an extra $10 to $30 a person being charged, which on a per person basis isn't really going to make much difference in somebody's retirement. But in the smaller plans, it's thousands of dollars per person in excessive and unnecessary fees for often services that aren't even being provided or performed because there's no bill being sent.
What kind of wacko fees have you found before?
Well, I'll give.
You're literally like the DOGE team of 401k.
Yes, I should use that in my marketing pieces.
I'm
Call
telling
myself.
you should apply. You should like reach out on social media and say, "Hey guys, I want a DOGE T-shirt. I'm the DOGE guy for 401ks."
DOGE, I know it's gotten some mixed reactions, but that's not a bad. Actually, that might not be
Hold
a
on, wait
bad
a second.
idea.
What mixed reaction? They're saving the taxpayers money every time I look up. Like there should be no mixed. Anyone that's like trying to burn down a Tesla because they're anti-DOGE is retarded. These people are
I
doing
like.
God's work trying to help us.
Well, that's yes, and I not to get off on a tangent, but I will agree. I wholeheartedly agree with you there. The idea that these people who profess to care about the environment are then burning down Tesla dealerships and doing damage to Teslas.
Yeah, they're basically terrorists, domestic terrorists. Like who decides to burn down someone? Here's the crazy thing. It doesn't affect Elon Musk. It affects the guy that bought that Tesla,
Yes, yeah.
burnt
Musk,
down or scratched up. I was at a place called Ross, like kind of like I don't know how you would describe Ross, but like a department store. And some guy in the parking lot's putting a swastika inside of on the side of a Tesla. And I called the cops. I held him down, and it was like the craziest thing in the world. I thought to myself, "Listen, buddy, this isn't Elon Musk Tesla. It's some guy."
yeah.
And luckily, the guy came out of Target. Yeah, he got a chance to file charges. These people are terrorists. They're domestic terrorists.
No argument there. And there is, I clearly, when you're exposing fraud, waste, and abuse, which I love to do in the retirement plans, that's a huge benefit to DOGE. But I always say, I really want to look at the big things like the military, Social Security, Medicare. And I don't know if there will ever be, or there haven't been yet, to my knowledge, meaningful cuts to the largest programs. This is kind of just cutting along the margins. But hey, maybe to your point, any cut in government is a good thing, and we should celebrate that.
Yeah, I think we should have DOGE for like even on a city or a state level. Like you look at all the states that are underwater financially. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure after like $100 billion, you should be able to build a railroad train to back and forth up and down California.
Or
And that's the greatest travesty of all is these poor citizens aren't getting what they pay for.
Yep, I mean, or a bridge that shouldn't go to nowhere, perhaps. If we're going to build a bridge, it should probably go somewhere. I think that was the famous example. But yeah, there's a whole litany of services that are being
Wait a
paid
second.
at levels that.
Where's the bridge from nowhere? I had this one I didn't hear about.
Oh, you didn't hear that one? That's
No.
like what I always think of. That's the, I guess, quintessential example. I think Sarah Palin mentioned that in like 2008. I'm thinking way back here that there was some kind of a bridge to nowhere. I don't know. Google it. There's a lot written about that. But yeah, that's like the poster child for government waste.
That's just crazy. That's just the cuckoo. Like seriously, cuckoo.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I hope that the Republicans will eventually start. I think hopefully to get more serious and pass meaningful cuts or reforms to the areas where we're actually spending the most. And I think that's been the criticism of DOGE is that it might be distracting us from the areas where we really need to make substantial cuts. But I still acknowledge I'm still happy that there's some waste and fraud and abuse that's being exposed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's amazing when people if you realize what's being done, it's all being done in the best interest of our country. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. We all win when taxes go down. And when you see wasteful spending or fraud in our taxes, Well, they're basically stealing from us. They're stealing from each and every American.
Yeah, yeah, and we all win when the budget is cut and there's less spending because one of the more pernicious taxes is inflation. I mean, I talk about stuff that's hidden because we don't see inflation. Politicians never really want to increase taxes. They'd rather just print money. And print money erodes our purchasing power and reduces the standard of living. When money gets printed, it doesn't always go to everyone equally. The people who are politically connected get access to that money before everybody else does. So, not a fan of that either.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. This is actually like an interesting conversation because now we're talking about saving people money. And when you do some of the work that you've done, talk a little bit of some of the exciting stories that you've had a chance to come across. What's some of the biggest things that you've been able to do for people?
Well, I think in I'll back up and not necessarily mention specific examples, but just let them know how a basic retirement plan operates. This is just a general piece of information that there are these advisors that get paid all this money that maybe do one meeting every 2 years. I mean, they hardly spend any time, and they over years, a period of a few years, in some cases, can make hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in some cases, even if someone's not working with me, they're like, wait a minute, I don't even need an advisor. You mean that I can actually stop that payment that I've been making all these years that I never got a bill for, that I didn't even know about? And I can call the record keeper and negotiate and simply do that by asking for a lower percentage that they're charging me. And I'll save myself and these employees hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. And the answer is yes. The other interesting point is that companies can actually write a check for these fees. And this is one of the biggest things because let's imagine you're a law firm and most of the money is the partners' money, the owners, because and for that reason they're paying the majority of the service charges because they're passed on not equally but in proportion to the account balances. They're not tax deductible, and this is something very few people really understand. But at the firm level, if they just were to write a check, they absolutely are. And I'll use Milton Friedman as an example. You might be familiar with him if you're into economics. He talks about the four ways to spend money. You can spend your own money on yourself, your own money on someone else's money on yourself, or somebody else's money on someone else. The latter is the worst because you don't economize and you don't seek the highest value. So just letting people know they can eliminate and negotiate fees and they can actually pay at the employer level, I think is really the most exciting piece of information I've come across and been able to share with people.
So you got to answer this question for me. What does your Christmas look like? Do you get tons of like gifts from people randomly that you've saved money for?
I wish if I got a gift for everyone that I helped, I would be able to engage in ongoing gift giving forever, and I would never have to worry about buying a gift again. But
That
you
is
know,
true. Like I would think like your UPS driver comes to you every Christmas with a truckload of gifts from people.
well, I I think about that and like how like what we appreciate. And sometimes we appreciate the way we relate to money is what we can see. And when we don't see something, we often are intimidated by it, don't understand it, or don't appreciate it. I use it like my phone bill. I get excited because I'm frugal and I guess I'm an anal retentive recovering CPA, just calling up my internet service provider and saving $20 a month or
Listen,
switching
buddy, I'm
over.
going to have you look at all my bills after this call. Like, I'm going to send you all my. I'm pretty sure Comcast is ripping, or not Comcast, but Cox is ripping me off.
Probably, and it's just because right, because you see it like even if it may not be a lot of money to you, like we relate to money through monthly charges, and why would we sign up for an unlimited plan if we're only using a service on a limited basis? And I just try to encourage people to think about money that way too. Just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there.
So, talk to people. A lot of people have fear about chasing their own dreams, becoming their own entrepreneur, but following their vision in life. Talk a little bit about how you overcame fear to be where you are at today.
I don't know. Well, at the time I did it, I don't know if I had that much fear because I was young and I didn't have that much to lose. So I didn't have as much fear only because I did it at a time when there wasn't a lot of risk. But even younger people could have fear. And I ultimately thought it would be better to bet on myself because I believed so strongly in the message of transparency, actually sending a bill to clients, which is this is the only industry where you make money without even having to send a bill, and the employer doesn't pay for it, so there's no sensitivity to the
How do you
cost.
get paid, by the way?
I get paid, I just assess a quarterly retainer fee that could either be paid by the company or the firm or the participants. But either way, there's an actual bill. And I'm telling you that there's nothing necessarily special about me. It's just that if you have the guts to actually send someone a bill, they're going to think a lot more about whether or not that charge, that fee is commensurate with the level of value. Because you can forget about someone's services and they'll keep taking the money, but you won't even know that they're getting paid.
That is true. That is, yeah, that
It's
is super true. And you bill
yeah,
out quarterly then?
yeah. I bill out quarterly, and I
When you
figured,
send the bill, do you show them, some of the things you've done in the last 3 months to save them money?
I don't actually put that on the bill, but I take notes for every conversation I have with every participant. So that way I'll be able to give a very specific accounting of exactly what I've done and what I've talked about and who I've talked to and how long that I've talked to them. Because, like, if you get a bill from an attorney, it's thousands of dollars, you're going to want a breakdown of those services so you know why you're paying all this money.
That's awesome, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, listen, Paul, I think what you're doing is interesting, especially now that we've got DOGE doing it on a massive level for America and our government. And I think everybody should be aware of what they're spending their money on, because if you're not aware, if you're not looking at the pennies, you're going to realize one day, holy smacks, I wasted all this money on waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, hey, by the way, would you consider some of the stuff that you found as being fraud?
Now, that's actually a very good question because I do describe myself as one who uncovers not only excessive and hidden fees and conflicts of interest, but sometimes even outright fraud in the 401k plan industry. What actually is fraud? Some people would say, well, fraud is just money being wrongfully taken out of your account for services that were never rendered. But what about this? In many cases, there are business owners who hire their golfing buddy or their brother in law or some relative to be the financial advisor for the 401k plan. And all of the employees have to pay this advisor, whether they use that advisor's services or not. That on and of itself is not necessarily fraud. But what if nobody is using the advisor? The advisor has not provided any services in 5 years, but they're getting an automatic fee for quote unquote management of the account that is added up to over $200,000 over a 5 year period. And oh, by the way, these accounts are participant directed. I'll use Ted Benna as an example. Ted Benna, that's the inventor of the 401k. So he has made the same criticisms as me that advisors need to get back to a fee for service model. They need to get back to getting paid just like accountants and attorneys, not fake managing an account. Those are my words, not his, but just focused on helping people retire like any other professional service provider would. And they're not doing an original piece of work, which is just bizarre and inefficient. These accounts are participant directed, which means participants actually choose from a pool of maybe 20 or 30 funds. Most of the funds are the same throughout most of these 401k plans. And the advisor's not actually making any management decisions. They're just waiting for the participants to call them, and they often don't even do that. So if you're overpaying a friend who's a financial advisor and not scrutinizing their compensation to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars for no services being rendered, is that fraud? And I would say yes.
Good for you, Paul. Good for you, man. It's hard when people have to be in your shoes, because in many ways you're the bearer of bad news. You're the one that's saying, "Hey, yo, I found all this fraud, waste, and abuse." And in some cases, if you call it out, you're calling somebody's buddy out for probably doing a shitty job.
And I've gotten some threatening emails from people
I
over the
bet you
years. I
have.
don't.
Okay, now that gets interesting. Give me the most threatening email you've ever got.
Oh, I still have it, and I still know that. I mean, I won't mention the person by name, but he's actually the advisor on a plan for a law firm that where that exact situation is happening. So it might be poetic justice if the firm finally takes my advice and fires this guy. So this was back in 2011. I mean, I remember a lot of details here, and he had said, I heard that you were telling some of my clients that you know me and a liar is not a fiduciary. Does your little shop even have a compliance department? Let's find out. Now, as you asked me earlier, what do I write on the bill, if anything, to break down what I've done? Well, I had a conversation with him earlier about several months ago, and he'd forgotten he'd talked to me. And I have notes on that conversation. I have the date, I have the time, I have the number that he called. And
Oh my God, you have the receipts. You
I
have the
had
receipts, buddy.
all of the receipts. And again, this was a plan, ironically, with the same record keeper, John Hancock, that was getting sued for excessive fees. So what I was telling them, the client, was legitimate. And he didn't remember that I talked to him. And when they said other clients I was calling of his that said that they worked with them, I'm like, oh, yeah, I know that guy. He had forgotten and then sent me a threatening email accusing me of falsely saying that I knew him. And I brought the receipts, so he was forced to backtrack and apologize for his statements.
I love it. I love when you got the receipts to call people out for their bullshit.
That's fun. I mean, it's a little bit scary because you never know who you might piss off. But I was willing to confront and face the consequences because that's just what I wanted to do. So that's another fear I have, is like, am I going to upset the wrong people? Are people going to be going after me as I start to raise more attention and shine more light on how these practices actually work? But I'll take my chances. That's my thought.
Well, I mean, you've kind of gotten a feel for what some of these young guys that are working on the DOGE team and the Department of Government Efficiency, you kind of feel you got to get a little bit of a feel for the threats that they must be getting. Like they must be getting unbelievable threats from Nancy Pelosi's team saying, "Listen, buddy, if you keep on unfolding all this fraud that we're doing, we're going to shoot you."
Anytime someone is on the dole and you're threatening their income, whether they deserve it or not, I agree. There's always going to be pushback, especially foreign aid. I've always found foreign aid, and I found this to be a very pithy statement, is a transfer of wealth from poor people in rich countries to rich people in poor countries.
Wow, that is such a great saying. I love that.
Yeah.
Foreign aid is a transfer of wealth from poor people in rich countries to rich, corrupt motherfuckers in poor
Yes.
countries.
Yes, I mean, where the money actually goes is not where you think it's good. Now, I support private donations. I mean, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not we should stop, aid that's going to these desperate people that badly need our help. But I don't know if what people think is happening is actually happening. And foreign aid, I know, can also make other countries more dependent on us and can actually ruin economies. I mean, there's some really good books written about that, just on how it can stifle entrepreneurship. Tom's Shoes was a good example of, I think, and that wasn't even foreign aid. They just donated all these shoes to people and they're giving them free stuff. But all these people in these countries that sold these products to people were put out of business. So even though people got all this free stuff, then all these businesses out were abruptly halted. So there's some unintended consequences, right?
Interesting. I never thought of that. That's actually very interesting. I'm a big fan of Tom's Shoes and what they're doing for people. I mean, you put shoes on the feet of a human being in a country that's poor. That's a life changer for those kids and those human beings.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that's what I would have thought, but I didn't really think about like what the consequences are. I haven't read about that in a while, but I know that even though it seemed like it was a good idea on the surface, it definitely caused some problems with their economy. And another issue is like we as a country have dumped a lot of cheap grain on other countries. James Bovard,
Cheap
uh,
what? Oh, grain. Grain.
grain, like cheap food, like we give away like the crap that we don't eat and give it to all these people. Hey, if people are starving, then what's wrong with giving away food? But it also causes a great deal of dependence. And then what happens to their farmers when we start giving? So back to your point about exposing corruption, that's the part I love about DOGE. The part I don't like is that they're not focused on cutting the areas that are affecting our debt the most. And I'm wondering if it could potentially be a smokescreen. As much as I love the cuts and the attention that we're paying, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think you're right. I think it's long overdue, but we have so much corruption inside of our government that this is just the beginning of weeding all of it out. And by the way, when you talk about corruption, you're talking about some straight up evil people who have probably been siphoning trillions of dollars out of the taxpayers' money.
Yeah, yeah. Trump's an interesting character about that. Is he the guy that's draining the swamp and ending? And he's different, and he's exposing a lot of what was never exposed before. And he had that famous clip with Hillary Clinton talking about
Oh,
how he avoids what was he saying? Like, yeah,
I
I'm.
do it like all your buddies do it.
Oh, that was so. That part I loved because that was what you might call unusual and radical, radical honesty. I know I'm smart.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, funny thing is, these politicians talk about, tax the rich, but all their tax benefits that they've created while in office were to benefit the rich.
Yeah, and with those donors, that's so true that she's talking about how important taxes are, while her donors that keep her afloat are the ones that benefit from it. So nothing is really ever going to change.
Yep.
But maybe it will.
I can't believe it. We're literally talking about DOGE today. One of my favorite subjects. I actually find what the DOGE team is doing is probably uh, one of the greatest human sacrifices for humanity I've seen in a long time. And they're all young kids too. Most of them are young kids.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of like you're speaking to on one hand, and I want to elaborate why I have mixed feelings. You're speaking to a part of me that I love. I hate entrenched elites. I hate people that are entrenched in a bureaucracy that don't want to change anything. I like people with a youthful spirit that want to shake things up. But I'm also a former auditor, and I know there have been some criticisms that maybe as much as these young kids are brilliant, that when they're exposing a lot of this, they might not have the experience to look at this thoroughly. Do you think that's true, or maybe they do, and we're not giving these kids enough credit?
No, I think literally what these kids are doing is probably one of the greatest sacrifices for humanity because a lot of them are getting death threats and straight up death
Yep.
threats from like people that'll actually kill you.
Well, and I don't know if they even realize what's going on, but they're still doing it. So if they're not really going to, are they getting rich off of this?
No, they're
No.
not even getting paid. I mean, they're getting paid by Elon, who's paying out of his money, but they're not getting paid out of the U.S. government. They're not getting paid from the taxpayers.
I didn't think about that. You're right. Either way, they're trying their best. And if they're willing to go through these threats, I mean, hey, I might think I'm magnanimous for doing what I'm doing, but this is corruption on a much deeper level. And this has been the problem with whistleblowers getting prosecuted. I think it was actually Obama that was the most heavy handed in terms of prosecuting whistleblowers.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like I said, you really take a huge risk when you do stuff like this. And in your case, you take a huge risk because you might be pointing out something that somebody's best friend who got the contract to manage the company's 401(k) is doing underhandedly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I just want to be careful not to maybe upset the mob or something. There's this one local company I know has mob connections, so that one
Bob's got
maybe
a
I'll.
401(k) now.
That yeah, well, they probably are in a lot of 401ks. So maybe like that particular plan, I may
Who
stay
scares
a
you
little.
more, the mob or Nancy Pelosi?
Well, is there a difference necessarily?
Oh, that's a good one to end the
Is it all?
podcast on. He is Paul Doge Sippil, and I got to tell you, this has been one of my favorite conversations in a long time, Paul.
Well, me too, and it's always great to commiserate with a kindred spirit.
You got it. All right, guys, check him out. He's Paul Sippil. He's the Doge guy.